Hey guys, today I want to talk to you a little bit about Issho. This leader has been very much neglected over the past over the past few sets, since set 4. And I want to kind of talk about him because I think he has an interesting place in the meta right now in EB01, particularly because of this card in particular. Brook really gave Issho another way to KO. It used to just be kind of Kobe. Everything else you didn't really want to use their on-play effects. You wanted to be able to use them every turn for the KO effects so that Issho can restand them. By the way, if you don't know what Issho does, you can't really read that. I'll read it to you guys. Dawn X1, your turn, give all of your opponent's characters -1 cost. It's a very strong minus effect, but usually nowadays we're looking at more individualized minus effects. So, you know, the extra couple characters that might get -1 doesn't really add that much value. At least that's what people think. I'm going to show you guys why that might not be the case. And end of turn, rest 1. To set one of your characters at the cost of 5 or less as active. So it's strong. I really think it's a strong ability. I think people, after Perona came out, people kind of gave up on Issho. He didn't really have as much support. And as you can see, the only real green card in this that we're running is Rosinante. But that's because he's not really a green leader. He's more of a black leader. What he wants to do is minus cost and KO things over and over and over and over because you can restand. So the kind of stars of the show are Kobe, a restandable KO effect. Again, if you don't know what he is, he's an STO8 card, and his text reads, activate main, you can rest this character KO up to one of your characters at the cost of 2 or less. So something you can rest Kobe, and then at the end of your turn restand him to protect him from being attacked into. The cards that were added from EB01 that add a lot of value to Issho are Laboon and Brook, who we discussed earlier. Laboon is another one of these, can turn it sideways to get a huge value swing. In this case, turn it sideways, give -4 cost. So that means with a combination of Kobe and Laboon, you're KOing a 6 cost, or Brook and Laboon, you're KOing a 5 cost. Just a really valuable play. You can then at the end of your turn restand your Laboon if you need, or if not, he acts as a pseudo blocker. The Brook, as we discussed, is another every turn this guy sideways, KO something. Although it's even better because it's a when attacking versus a just turn this character sideways. So you're getting the value out of attacking. Then the rest of the package is pretty heavy in Navy. The 2Ks that I picked are pretty standard, I feel like, nowadays with Suru. The other 2 I've picked because you can buy them back with Rebecca. You can buy Perona back and T-Bone back with Rebecca. T-Bone is also searchable by brand new, so you have 8 of your 2Ks searchable by your searcher. And Perona, I think, is very valuable in this deck against certain matchups. You can use her discard 1 from hand, and is really powerful. It's another minus effect as well if they have those 5 cards in hand. So that's the 2K package. I think it's relatively easy to understand. Suru is Suru. T-Bone, I have used his on-play effect once, but it's not really why he's here. The other great thing about the color combination of black and green is you're given the strongest blocker package in the game. Rebecca, Borsellino, and Rosinante. Rosinante being able to protect your rested characters, so if you can't restand, let's say your Laboon, and they go to KO it rather than swinging into it, Rosinante. Oh, and Sabo. How could I forget about Sabo? Truly the best blocker package, I think, in the game. I think people who don't run this and they're running Perona, I think are silly. Although Perona has other reasons why you wouldn't run Rebecca. But for this, you're very lucky to be able to run those. And I think this is where the little twinge of green really adds a lot, is with Rosinante. Currently, I'm running 2 Hinas. This is kind of... I don't run very many non-counter cards in the deck, which does make the deck feel very powerful, very defensive. You're able to stay alive pretty easily because most of the cards in your hand are going to be counter. This is kind of the 4th copies of each of these, because I felt like I was getting too many Geckos and too many Ishos in hand. You only really need 1 of each. And so it's not a deck that wants to chain Geckos or chain Ishos. You really need 1 on the board to stick, and you're feeling pretty good. This could turn into Helmeppos because there's a really strong value play if this was a Helmeppo with Gecko Moria, Rebecca, Brooke, and Helmeppo, where you're able to KO something very, very large. I believe it's a 3/4. You can KO a 4 cost. While you're playing out a blocker, a swinger, and a body. It's very strong. But currently I'm running it as a Hina because I feel like the -4 is more valuable. I've definitely gotten a lot of value out of Hina before. In this section, I want to talk about some more advanced combos. Not necessarily advanced combos, but ways to think about the deck, because it's a deck that hasn't gotten almost any playtime or theory crafting over the last, I would say, 6 months. The first is Black Yellow Luffy, who, at least in my personal local meta, I end up seeing a lot. These 2 cards are your best friends for Black Yellow Luffy. For one, Issho lets you rip 2 cards out of their hand, which Black Yellow Luffy players really love building a super large hand. And ripping 2 cards out of their hand, it does sound good and it feels good, but it adds a lot more value than people might think. Because if you rip 2 cards out of their hand, they go from 6 to 4. So already a huge value play. It's almost like you swung 7 and they had to counter out of it. But there's also a chance you get a big body. There's a chance against Black Yellow Luffy that you're going to get their Gecko. There is a chance that you get a 2K. You don't really want to get the boys in the trash, but it feels so good to get a Gecko into trash off of an Issho play. Once you have Issho on the board against Black Yellow Luffy, he has no answer to him except for swinging into him, and that's why you have that super large blocker package. So you have your Issho on the board, you've played it, you've ripped some cards out of hand, or you haven't. Another thing that I think a lot of players have trouble with is they don't slam down the Issho because they're not going to. He has 5 cards in hand. You're not going to get the value out of it. In that case, you still have to play the Issho, especially against Black Yellow Luffy. The -3, Dawn X1 -3 to all is so valuable, especially in combination with Kobe, who KOs at 2 or less. Whatever they play, you put a Dawn on Issho, and you KO with Kobe, restand Kobe, swing for 10 against whatever else they have that they've rested. This obviously only works if they didn't play a Sabo last turn, but if they did, then you play blockers, you build up your board in some other way, preparing for the inevitable big swing that you're going to do against them. Once they have no Sabo effect on board, you can just KO anything that they have. These 2 have won me so many Black Yellow Luffy matchups. The other nice thing about this deck is because you're running so many blockers, his giant swings just don't matter. He has no way to bypass blockers for the most part. So you're just very, very strong into the Black Yellow Luffy, especially if you play the Sabo, because maybe they're playing the Amaru. Playing the Sabo down against Black Yellow Luffy is another extreme value play. Okay, let's talk about RP Law. RP Law is a super hard matchup for anyone. I mean, it's the reason he's the best deck in the meta. But RP Law can be dealt with. And Brook is your MVP for the RP Law matchup. Most things he's going to play are 4 cost or 5 cost if he gets the kid on board. And the combination of, let's say you have a Laboon, let's say you have, there's just so many things. Let's say you have an Issho, let's say you play out a Perona. Your Brook is going to be able to, I mean, just your leader effect in your Brook, you're already KOing at 2 cost. So you only need to find 2 more, a Suru and a Brook. That's a 4 cost play to KO any of their 4 costs. And you can do it every turn. That's why he's so valuable. He's also in this 4K stat line, which is just above where he can cast it, where he can bottom deck it for free. So he's going to have to actually put a little bit of work in to getting rid of your Brook. Brook is definitely the MVP. It's a very difficult matchup. It's a very difficult matchup for anyone. But Issho definitely is, I think, has a good matchup into it because he can restand his things. One of the ways that Law players deal with, like, whittle you down and kill you, is you swing into them and they basically just use their extremely wide board as a removal. They use their leader effect to get 1 removal off, and then they just attack 5 into all of your things, into all of your rested characters. And with Issho's ability to restand it, it means that they have to use their leader effect to get rid of this thing. And that means that they're leaving on board your Kobe, they're leaving on board your Sabo, your Borsalino. So, you know, they have to pick one of your KO effects, and they almost always pick not Brook because he's so annoying. He's, you know, it feels really bad to use a 2K on him in Otama, and it feels even worse to use a raise max to -3 on a 4K. Card is amazing into that matchup. Okay, the next I want to talk about is a couple different ones kind of built into one. I'm going to talk about Anel and Uta and the other things that like to play big bodies and be campy. I think this package here is going to be your best friend. You want to play out your Rebekahs for blockers, because your Rebekahs let you play out your Brooks and your Hinas, either getting your KO or your minus effects, and then playing the other one from hand to get the minus effect. Same thing with Issho. Between Issho, leader effect, Hina, you're getting -3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That's just with these two things and your leader effect. Just a very, very valuable play. Then with Brook, -9, boom, that's a Yamato. It's difficult because you have to get especially your Issho to stick. Issho on 8 Dawn on curve feels so good, especially if you can make sure to keep it stick. Just keep it on the board, keep it to stick. So that's kind of how you deal with big bodies in this deck, because we're not running any Ice Ages. I don't run any Ice Ages right now because, again, as I said earlier, it just feels like it's not what the deck wants to do. The deck wants to KO your things while building bodies. It's very similar to what Sakazuki was doing, but Sakazuki was also able to bottom deck. But it's a very, very similar idea. There's just a little bit more defense built into it rather than self-mill and offense, which I feel like is what Sakazuki was doing because he had an on-attacking ability and all that. So, in all, Issho, I think, is a very underserviced deck. I think he has a lot of potential, but just no one plays him, because why would you play Issho when you can play something else? Another card to think about would be Marineford, or Navy HQ, I think is actually the official translation. Because you are a Navy type. I've thought about it. It's another thing that's a static -1. It's good. I just haven't found space for it. I feel like the deck is extremely tight already. So there's more testing to be done, especially once 07 comes out and you get Stussy, which I think is super strong. Especially because you're going to have things like brand news on the board already that you can KO with Stussy and not feel bad about it at all. Especially because you can play Gecko, get them back with Geckos and everything. You might have noticed the Kinemon at some point. This is something I also recommend with Issho or Bonnie, a character, a leader with a end of turn rest 1. Is use some kind of Dawn that's different than all of your other Dawn. In this case, I'm using a Chinese copy of Alt Art Kinemon. Long story. Because when you have your Dawn out, you can set one aside, and it looks different than the rest of your Dawn. To remember to use your leader effect at the end of turn. So yeah, that's a little bit of a deck tech on Issho. I want to do some more content on him, and some more content in general. So be on the lookout for that. Thanks so much.